Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Webdelics podcast, where we're on a journey to find out the truth about plant medicines, get rid of the myths, and change the narrative. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and with us today is a very special group of people. Now, usually I read guest bios at this point, but today we're going to handle things a little bit differently because the folks here truly deserve that. All I'll say right now to the guests in the house is welcome to the show. It's good to have you here. Now, the purpose of the episode today is for us to have a group discussion about psychedelics. What do we know about it as regular folks who are not experts in the psychedelic space? Webdelics is here to provide trusted and reliable information about plant medicine and psychedelics from someone that regular folks can relate to. I try and make sure that how I'm presenting as a non-expert in the field is as relatable as possible. But as relatable to everyday folks as I might be, I ain't everybody. And so I wanted to bring into the house a group of people that represented a broader spectrum of the population who might be interested in psychedelics, but like me, don't know a lot. And that's where each of you all taking the time to show up today, give your thought and your opinions, and share some of your feelings is so deeply appreciated. Before we move any further, why don't we do some intros? I'm going to turn to folks and just ask who you are, and maybe you could say a thing or two about what you do. Rita, I'm starting with you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone, and hi, Scott. I'm Rita Andriella Farron. Obviously, I'm actually an ordained minister of New Thought philosophy called religious science, and my husband and I founded and run a beautiful, amazing center on the island of Kauai, where we teach, we have beautiful services and events, and it's a wonderful, beautiful, amazing place to live, of course. So that's who I am, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And as you can imagine, as we go on this journey together, there are going to be a lot of issues that come up that relate to your area of employment. And
Yes.
I can't wait to hear what you think about it.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
And Maim, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Scott, it is a great pleasure meeting you again, my friend, especially virtually via podcast platform. So my name is Maim. I'm originally from New York City, and right now I'm currently a graduate student studying public policy and management. The main reason that I came onto this podcast is the fact that I'm really interested into the world of psychedelics, right? Okay, maybe not the like a super fanatic, neither have I ever tried it, and I don't know if I will, but rather I'm really interested in the policy implications of it. Given that I have ambitions of going into government and really the field of policy in general, there's been a lot of heated discussion, especially in recent years within drug usage, and this conversation is now further extending to the area of psychedelics. So as a result, the main reason I kind of want to be on here is the fact that I have a very juvenile understanding about plant-based medicines, and as a result, I want to further enhance my knowledge and also try to tie and bring back whatever I know into relevant conversations that are happening today. And hopefully there can be lessons learned not for me as an individual, but ultimately for different people and especially the future generations.
Phyllis, welcome to the show. Who
Thank
are
you.
you?
Thank you,
What
Scott.
you doing here? Yeah.
I hope I'm going to learn that over the course of our episodes. My name's Phyllis Arnold. I'm a retired lawyer, and I'm recovering. And I've spent my career largely in the public sector. I'm really curious about this. I'm as curious to learn why everybody else is here, and I'm looking forward to getting to know the subject and getting to know the people. So thank you for having me.
Thrilled to have you here. Eileen, share a little bit about who you are.
Thank you, Scott. I'm glad to be here. I'm Eileen Karina. I am a patient safety advocate for 25 years, running a nonprofit organization where we help families through the healthcare system. I'm also a full-time caregiver for my brother with numerous disabilities and concerns. I've just started doing that about a year ago full-time. And I spent 20 years in the post office as a postal clerk and on-the-job trainer.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Lachelle, now you have quite an interesting story. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but why don't you just briefly tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, Scott, thank you so much for having me here, and it's a pleasure to be on this panel with everyone. I am Lachelle Atkins, also known as America's Supermom. My husband and I have 15 children, and my platform is mental wellness. So I had my own struggle with depression for 13 years. I was hospitalized 3 times, and now I am about empowering women and moms with strategies and tips so that they can have all they desire out of life without the expense of their health.
Thank you for that, Lachelle. All of us came here, and we've touched on this a little bit because in one way or another, we are curious about psychedelics and plant medicine, what they are, what they mean for the future, how they can impact people. During the first episode of this podcast, I shared my own interest in this in some detail. I talked about my own childhood and some trauma that I had that left me with severe post-traumatic stress disorder that I was in counseling for 11 years in order to fully cope. And I talked about how much I wish there had been some space for me to go and heal in a way that might have been more time efficient. I also talked about sometimes a sense of loss that I had because the issues that I developed in response to the challenges that I faced as a little boy kept me from being able to live out my full potential, be everything that was possible for me to be. And I imagined what the world would be like if all the other little boys and little girls and other little folks out there that might have gone through some of the things I went through had that chance and didn't have to struggle as long and as hard as I did. There were some shortcuts for them. I'm curious to hear whether any of you, as you become aware of psychedelics in whatever minimal way it might be, have any feelings about how psychedelics might have personally impacted you or others in your life that you care about. Lachelle, I'm going to start with you because you've already dipped your toes into this. Give me your additional thoughts.
Well, I love conversations because I think, when we have conversations, we are exploring different perspectives, and there is no cookie cutter way for people to heal or to process a lot of things. So I feel like, when we come together, when it comes to solutions for people who may be struggling with trauma, that we keep the end in mind. And sometimes everyone's journey is different. However, the overall focus should be healing. So, it's just like me traveling from Georgia to California. There's numerous of roads that I could take to get there. The choice is really mine on what I decide to do, whether it's the vehicle I take, the mode of transportation, or things of that nature. So I think it is an opportunity for us to explore, not really being so judgmental about a particular prescription that someone takes, but understanding what the ultimate goal is. And I think when we come together with the goal in mind, we're able to explore a lot of different solutions without that judgment or stigma with different things that might be possible for us to accomplish our goals.
Very, very much for that. There's a lot to unpack in that and a lot that we'll revisit a little bit later in this episode. Eileen, hearing my frame why I'm here, do you have any thoughts? What's your personal investment in psychedelics, plant medicine?
Well, I don't know about them, so I'm always open to learn about medication or something that is going to help someone that we might not be aware of. I know that I'm very familiar with medication errors and interactions and problems that happen with medication and people not understanding what they're taking, why they're taking it, and just being given more. If there's something out there that we're not aware of and that could be helpful, I think it's really exciting to learn about it and to know that there's something out there that might be helpful. Again, I work with a family member who has a lot of problems, and maybe this is the missing link to helping him, or maybe other people need to know what's out there. We're just not giving attention to things that we don't understand. We need to pay attention to things that we don't know and learn about them. So I'm glad to be a vessel to hopefully learn about something that might be
Thank
new.
you. Phyllis?
Well, I think for me personally, there are a number of threads make this an interesting prospect for me. As you know, Scott, I spent some time working and still am associated with an organization that provides shelter and services for survivors of domestic violence and homeless families.
Yes.
The services and support is all trauma-informed care. And I think I learned a lot in the years I worked there about the role trauma plays in wrecking people's lives and how critical it is to deliver trauma-informed care in the healing. So I'm very interested in the therapeutic prospects of psychedelics in that respect. For me, also, I think right now I'm aging, and I'm pretty freaked out about it. I'm finding it. I'm just incredulous. I can't quite believe I'm who I am right now, and it's just a very puzzling, difficult process. So I'm hoping. I don't know. I'm wondering whether there isn't some, more integrated, whole, constructive way to approach, the end of life, because it's coming whether I'm ready or not, and I'd rather, kind of greet it and then fight it. So.
Yeah. I just have to respond to a couple of things that you said there. When I first found out about this podcast and began to think more deeply about psychedelics, I was utterly unaware. Psychedelics have within their treatment purview issues related to depression and end of life. And that is something that anyone who is over a certain age, that I won't utter out loud, ultimately becomes concerned about, and we plan on addressing that during this show. I look forward very much to more thinking about this from you, as well as your thoughts about that as that episode approaches. Now, I do want to talk briefly about the organization that you worked for, because one of the things that was striking about it, particularly as from what I know about this space, domestic violence to be specific, that there's a lot of return into the shelter system once people have escaped abusers and gone through the therapy, the talk therapy that these shelter systems provide. And the organization that you're talking about, by the way, is top of the line in the United States. And the quality of the talk therapy services that it provides are in alignment with it being top of the line. And so one of the things that is very interesting to me, and I would be curious as to whether you have any additional thoughts about, is to the extent to which some of the trauma issues that are driving people back into the system over and over again, under circumstances that are tragic, really could have not only an impact on those people's lives, but the lives of everyone around them.
Well, I think for sure it's trauma doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's very much driven by, shaped by, informed by economic, social circumstances, and the people. I mean, families, friends. I think part of what makes the organization so top of the line is that the lens is very wide, and it looks at somebody's whole life, from economic empowerment to literacy, sustainable existence, to try to break through that cycle, to be able to sort of have somebody's life launch in an independent way, and not end up back in the shelter, the victim, and to kind of be the survivor.
The relaunching of a life. What a powerful possibility. Rita, talk. What investment do you have, particularly as a minister in psychedelics?
I'm really glad I'm here because I'm coming at it from a more judgmental standpoint, and I don't like to be judgmental. And I'm glad that we're all talking about healing, because there's many ways to heal, right? And I'm in the business of healing. That's one of the things that I do in my profession is people come to me and we sit there and we talk, and I bring people back to themselves, to their true self. But sometimes that's like a process. It's not an overnight process. And I've had people, I'm going to just say it out. Ayahuasca is is that included in this conversation?
Very much so.
Okay, good. So I had a very kind of weird experience with an ayahuasca situation on the island that impacted our center. And what I got from it was this person telling me, this supposed shaman, I don't know if he really was a shaman, that he could do what I do in one night. And that basically, that you don't need this long process of going into, because I don't do counseling. I'm not a psychiatrist, but or even a therapist, but I am a spiritual counselor. So that he was saying that he could do in one night what I could do, over a process of time. And it took me a long time to get where I am right now, in where I feel comfortable with myself, and I've moved myself through a lot of trauma and childhood stuff. And I did it in a more like a spiritual way, but it took me a while, I will say, and I still confront things sometimes. So I'm here because I want to learn about this, and I don't want to be judgmental about it. And I have people come to me that I know that I can't help because they need something else. They need to be with a therapist. They need to be, there's a lot of mental illness where I live, and people seem to be attracted to our center that are in that frame of mind. And I can give love and I can open myself up, but sometimes I don't feel like I'm really totally reaching. And it's sad. It's sad to me because I feel like there's a lot of mental illness that's not getting attended to at all. And if this is something that can help people, but my judgment comes from somebody saying, I can do in one night what you could do, and going toward people that may, without having the real help that they need to do it. I'm sure if you had a shaman and somebody that was very, taking you on a journey or whatever, and was in a professional standpoint, I don't know how else to express it, that would be different than somebody just saying, I can do in one night what you can do in, a year or whatever, or however many years. So I think I do have some judgment about it, but yet I'm open to learn because I'm a very open person in that I want to learn and I want to be very good at what I do and I want to be able to help people. And we're all talking about healing, and that's what this is all about, right? Healing, no matter what. So I'm open about it. But I had that one bad experience, and so I want to learn more about it, and I want to know if I can direct somebody to somebody that's going to help them, and where I can't seem to be helping them, then I'm open to it. So I'm here to learn.
That's keeping it real, Rita. And that's what we're all about. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. Maim, talk. Why do you care?
So first, I just have to say it's really impressive just to hear so many people's lived experiences and your background. And overall, I'm just very excited to get to know all of you. And the reason I guess I'm kind of interested in this process, and just for context, I don't have any personal connection with any plant-based medicine, but overall I find the field to be very fascinating, in part because I'm currently trying to enter the public policy space, and one of my main reasons that I study this issue and I hope to have a long-term career in it is that I could have or make legislation that better impacts people's lives for the better. So that's really my goal, or this outcome. And I've done a lot of readings in regards to psychedelics and how at times not only is it very helpful, but it also could be very life-changing for individuals that are for better. And one of the things that I did remember when Scott first pulled me into this project, he was essentially telling me that there's been a lot of research being invested, especially towards veterans who have PTSD. Of course, and I believe it was Rita that brought it up, I'm also a little bit skeptical in regards to the entire thing. But the main reason I'm here is to learn, right? I feel that learning is very critical. And if individuals don't learn about this process, what can it entail? Then ultimately we're doing a disservice for not only to ourselves, but for future generations. And that's really all I'm here for.
And that's not insignificant at all. That's the biggest picture that there is. Rita and Maim, you both talked a little bit about stereotypes or judgments or assumptions that you or other people might have about psychedelics. I am going to ask each of you, when you first heard the word psychedelics come out of my mouth, as we talked about this panel, what was your initial reaction about the topic or about the people who might be using them? Phyllis, I'm going to start with you.
I think the first thing I asked you was, what? Are we going to have to take them? I had no idea what the goal of this exercise was. I couldn't conceive of this process. I'm still having a little trouble getting my arms around it, but hey, but interestingly, a couple of things kind of happened coincidentally. I read there was one or two articles that were in the press about on or about the same time we spoke. I thought that was pretty interesting, and they were very interesting. I thought they talked the accounts were intriguing about the therapeutic aspects for PTSD, for depression, for sort of long-term health benefits. And somebody I know who also is on the back nine, if you will, as I am, is also looking at this personally, to go undergo therapy, and we were kind of independently came to this, and were very surprised, I think, that we shared this interest. So yeah, so those were my curious.
Eileen, when you hear psychedelics, what is your initial reaction? What do you think about folks that are using them? Am I the only one, by the way, who thought about Jimi Hendrix and people like that? Please let me know.
Well, I wasn't going to use names, but I did think about when I was early high school. This was a no-no. This was, ooh, that's the stuff you stay away from. That's the serious stuff. It's probably really expensive, and only the real bad kids do psychedelics. So my first reaction was, why don't they change the name of it if that's what we're, is it a type of a drug or medication? Why don't they use something we know how to spell? Why do they have to make it so complicated, like other, pharmaceuticals? So my first reaction was, why would I want to get involved with that? Because it's a bad thing. But once we start talking about it, I don't know what I grew up thinking it's something that you don't tell your parents you do, and you get in trouble if you get caught with it. And I did everything, tried everything but, because that was the serious stuff. And now we're talking about it could be helpful all this time. So I just don't know what I don't know. So I'm excited about learning about it, and maybe even sharing information if I get smarter with that information.
It's funny that you say that about bad people. So the very first people outside of my family that I told I was doing psychedelics-based podcast to, they reacted with horror. You should have seen the look on their face. There was silence, then there was, oh my. And they were like, there was some of this, you, Scott? Are you sure you want to do this? Are you going to ruin your life? All this sort of stuff. And so I think that sort of goes as to the initial reaction that some folks have, and that sort of honesty from them I really appreciated, because moving into this space, there are those that associate these with the war on drugs in the 70s and the 80s, or with bad people who did weird things back in the 60s, or maybe even different things, raves and parties and things like that might have been not things that you necessarily would want to associate yourself with if it's in later decades. With that in mind, Maim, talk to me about your first reaction, because you're a completely different generation than the others who have spoken so far.
So I just got to say that it was great hearing a lot of different perspectives, and I did get a lot of chuckles out. Eileen, just like you, I was a goody two-shoes, especially in school. So anytime, like the word psychedelics, the first thing, I think I've heard of the term when I was first in high school, and probably in my freshman year health class, right, which probably was about a decade ago. And of course, that's the first thing I heard about that I would associate with something, a negative connotation, right? This is something you want to stay away from. It's probably crack or Molly, and it could ultimately ruin your life. And I think none of us want to ruin our lives, especially at the current state or age that we currently are. And just a little bit of backtrack. So initially, when I first heard the term, I had like negative connotations about it. And I guess when I was progressing through college, I learned a little bit more about the works published in regards to psychedelics. And as a result, my knowledge is still relatively juvenile in regards to the field, but I'm still understanding the implications of it and how it can be beneficial. So to really sum it up, I thought it was a scary term at first, didn't really want to do anything with it. I was a little concerned when Scott first brought it up to me. I was like, does he want us to try it? I was like, I'm pretty sure that's illegal. And it's like, But of course, like Scott reassured me, it's not nothing illegal. He won't force us to try it, which of course is always a plus. So I was very grateful.
Maim, I just want to comment, Maim, on I was far from a goody two shoes, but even I
Well,
would not
can I
go near psychedelics.
can I
That
comment
comment,
on that just real quick? Just a footnote and a confession. My actual real first thought was, am I going to have to disclose all the times I used and everything and all my trips and everything, and like, oh my, because I am a much earlier generation, and we grew up with abandon.
I like that word, abandon. I might use that sometime, Phyllis. Now, Lachelle, you and I are even younger than Maim. I don't know about you, but I just turned 23 2 days ago. So we're not part of any of that generational stuff. So, and I'm a city boy. Are you a city gal, Lachelle?
Really, to be honest, I did not have any judgment about it. And as I listen to everyone share, I just think that's amazing because I grew up privileged as an only child. I was a high achiever, and it definitely was something I would not have even been exploring growing up with the focus and, mindset that I have. But after my own experience, it has taught me a lot about unlearning and really finding out who I am and understanding that everybody is different. Raising a big family, you understand that there are no two children that are alike. Even sharing a message or a command, you sometimes have to give it differently to different children in order for them to understand. So I think it goes back to really, I never really had that. It was like, and I think that's really shocking, but I have had a relationship with you, even though I never met you in person. I feel like I know you. So I just trusted that it was something of substance and quality based on how we met in our relationship, how it is family oriented, but professional. And we've always had conversations that challenge us outside of societal norms. So I didn't really think anything about it at all.
You let me down, Lachelle. What am I going to do? So now I'm going to have to turn to Rita and ask her that question. But don't worry, Lachelle. We're
So
going to get back
the
to
question is, because I got cut off a little bit. The question was, how do we feel when you asked us to do this?
And what's your reaction? What was your first thought about the word psychedelics and people who might use them?
I'm kind of with Eileen. Is that Eileen? Yes. No, not Eileen. Phyllis. I grew up in the 60s, so I don't want to disclose too much. I mean, I dipped my toes in a little bit, but not a lot, and I had very adverse reactions to it when I did. So I kind of stayed away from it. So when you asked us to do this, I was like, oh, am I going to actually have to change my opinion about this? Am I going to learn something new? Am I going to be going back and doing it again? I mean, I am a minister. I am respectable. All those things came up for me. But I just, I did tell somebody, like you said, Scott, I told somebody that I was doing this, and they did the same thing. They went like this, like, I don't know, like they thought I was going to come back and, be saying, everybody, let's go, let's do psychedelics. No. There's a lot of like mixed feelings. I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. And again, I'm going to go back to what I said. I want to learn about it. And maybe I'm going to take a trip back. No, I don't mean that. I mean, I'm going to go back and like kind of redo all that. Not by doing psychedelics, but by learning more about it. I'm going to redo all that judgment that I have and all that, that I have about it. That's what I'm hoping anyway, and knowing. And so I don't know if I'm rambling here, but yeah. So it's just like, okay, there's no mistake. I always believe there's no mistakes, and there's a reason why I'm sitting here with all of you, and something really amazing that I'm going to learn from this, and it's going to expand me. So I'm grateful. So yeah, but my first reaction.
You're not rambling. You're
okay.
You're not
I
rambling.
am.
You're keeping it real, Rita, and that's a wonderful thing.
You can
that's
always
all,
guarantee
that's all
I
that
will
we
keep
ask.
it real.
Hey, we're together in that. Now, Lachelle, you talked about trust. You were willing to be involved because we had a prior relationship and you felt I wouldn't lead you into something that was kind of crazy. And I appreciate you saying that. One of the things that I believe in really towing a strict line on is building that trust and credibility through the episodes that we have by making sure that the guests that we bring onto the show have something meaningful to say, so that you can trust that by tuning in, you'll gain information and insight, and also trust that questions that you might have that are reasonable will be answered. And so I'm going to ask from you all is to let me know, what are the things that keep you from having trust in psychedelics? What are the things that scare you? Phyllis? Oh, yes, Lachelle, go.
Well, I think a lot of it is our own preconceived notions about it. I love what Rita said about, how she grew up in that time frame. Now, I think a lot of times we associate the judgment over what we know about it, right? So I didn't experience that, so I just don't have judgment about that. So just to give you an example, I had this lady. This was one of the first things I did after I got out of the hospital. I went to a vision board party. And the woman said, she was the keynote speaker. She said, I want to introduce myself. I used to be a prostitute. So everybody's looking around and she's like, I wasn't on a street corner, but I was a single mom. I had to do what I had to do to pay my bills. She said, I can say that without conviction because I'm not that person anymore. So sometimes when we have histories with things, there's a part of that history that we want to hide, pretend doesn't exist. And so that's where a lot of the judgment comes, because we're afraid if a part of that comes out. So I could say openly, that this isn't an issue for me. However, if it might have been something else, what might have happened? So I think when we talk about trust, it's really that inner process of us being able to understand that everybody's different. We go through different things. We don't know what we don't know. And what we choose to put our attention in and how we want to heal from that is what's important. Because there's a lot of things that we did as in our youth that, now being older, we probably might not have done that. And understanding the power of influence and habits and people you hang out with. You learn this over time. So I think really having our eyes opened about the fact that everybody's different. What is our history with the topic? That plays a part in how we're able to explore it as a viable solution for
Phyllis,
some people going through trauma.
What are your thoughts about all that?
Um, that was deep, Lachelle. Deep.
That's Lachelle.
I'm very literal when I feel, very small and literal. Trust. Psychedelics are very strong, and they're very potent. And I think part of what I think about on a very literal level is that strength is the thing that shakes some trust. So, for example, Rita, you say you had an adverse reaction. It's, in those days, lots of people did. Lots of people had bad experiences because there was all sorts of reasons. Whatever they were dropping, and it wasn't pure, wasn't good, it was too pure, whatever it was that didn't mix, didn't sit well. So, and you can't trust something that hurts you. So I guess I think about that when I think about reintroducing psychedelics in a therapeutic way as instruments of healing trauma. I think they've got some territory to cover, to come back, to be able to trust them as instruments of healing, because they had, this kind of shaky history. So, and that's the source of some skepticism, I think. And I never had a bad experience. I did what my mother wants, but don't we all? So, yeah, I guess I think there's some proving that this process has to do to me.
Thank you. Eileen.
Well, nothing about this scares me or concerns me because I have control over what I'm going to do and what I'm going to put in my body. I'm completely non-judgmental. If somebody uses this and it helps them, then more power to them. If they're using it and it's not working for them, then my role might be to help them to get the help that they need. So nothing about this concerns me. Of course, I'm curious and I would like to learn about it, but I have no fear about it. It's ironic when we talk about bad experiences. I had bad experiences with other things that scared the heck out of me and got me to stop for a week what I was doing. That was naughty. But as an adult, I have no doubt that that there's hope for some people using some things that I may not want to use, and I have complete control over what I'm going to do.
Now, Maim may be thinking about this next sentence that I'm about to put out already due to the nature of his work. It sounds like there's not a trust gap when it comes to the impact of psychedelics being used by individuals. But let's look a little bit beyond individuals. Do you have any trust that needs to be established before you would feel comfortable with, let's say, psychedelics being out there in the world, maybe legal, maybe regularly being at dispensaries, or something that people check out by going into a psychedelic, I don't know, rehab center or something like that? Does that raise any concerns or fears for you, or are you comfortable with that too?
I think it comes down to the education component. It's no different than some cigarettes being in a vending machine or something, and it's labeled on the outside what too much of this can cause when it comes to cancer or something like that. I think there's this element to where people allow the misuse or the ignorance of using this particular method to speak louder than what education does. So I think making sure that people understand, but it's no different than you watching TV and this commercial comes on telling you about the best antidote for heart disease, but then it has 20 different side effects, possibly death at the end of it. So it's no different than anything else. But I think education is key, because a lot of people, and even if it's measured, you have some prescription medication that is controlled because it has addictive properties and things like that. So I think the education component is what I
dropped your name a minute ago, so I'm going to turn to you next.
Of course, Scott. You know what's really funny is that the first time you posed that question in regards to trust, I think, like you were mentioning before, some of the previous panelists were thinking more in terms of individuals levels. I literally was taking notes right before you made the comment about like the societal implications of what happens if psychedelics were legalized. And I think Lachelle brought up a really good point. So I guess like to pre-phrase with it, I think when I was thinking about the process of trust, of course, I know the individual benefits, and just based on what everyone's saying, it's like so enriching to hear. But I guess I was like thinking more in terms of the legal aspect, right? Why have psychedelics have been illegal for a long period of time? And of course, this is mirrored with a lot of controversial policies. I think it also stems from misinformation, but I do think there's also some truth to why the plant-based medicine has been illegal. One of the aspects that easily hits my mind is in regards to the physical health, right, of individuals. I'm not too familiar, and of course, anyone is feel more than free to correct me, but from my understanding, sometimes taking psychedelics can have multiple side effects on an individual, especially if they're not very careful with it. It could cause dizziness, muscle spasms, or any other bodily functions that could cause harm, and that's why I guess it has been precisely banned for a long period of time. And I guess I was also looking at the second angle is in regards to the misuse, right? Kids, I work with kids. I was really close to becoming a school teacher, happy to talk about it. Unfortunately, kids are a little savvy these days, and they will like to put anything just to seem cool, which I do not encourage. And I think there's where that fear also stems into play, where if we're going to legalize it en masse, what happens if little Timmy goes under his older brother's bed and then, takes a few psychedelic pills and goes to tries it out at school with his friends and ends up overdosing. But I think to that point, and going back to what Lachelle said, I think she brought up this really good idea that it really stems from education, right? I'm a firm believer that if certain things are not taken into moderation, then obviously it's going to cause severe health effects, because I don't necessarily want to overlook the benefits that psychedelics has versus all these minor things. But over the course of this series, I'd also like to explore maybe the policy implications. What are the certain solutions we can implement to prevent these measures from happening, and what can we do to achieve a very equitable outcome in the long run?
And make no mistake, we will be addressing that. But when those episodes are released, we want to make sure that your questions are answered. Rita, trust you and psychedelics.
I am with what Lachelle said. My major concern is education, counseling, people having the support that they require if they're going to do something like this. I'm not for it just being on the market. You can go get it like we can get certain things, because what I know from my own work with people is that there are people that are very troubled that need help. And if they can get help from this is wonderful, but not without education. It's like, when people give people, my mother-in-law, she had just lost her husband. The first thing they did was put her on something to make her okay so she wouldn't have her feelings about it. Just let's calm her down and then just leave her there. I don't agree with that. I think that if you're going to put somebody on something, then you have to do the inner work at the same time. So that I would say education, counseling, I agree with that. Okay.
I'm going to make this a free-for-all. If there is any question that you all feel you have to have answered for this show to make you feel as though you are truly informed, what would that question or maybe a few questions be? Any thoughts from anyone?
I want to know, how is it going to help, and is it going to be lasting? Because that's another thing that I worry about too. Like, so you have this wonderful experience doing this psychedelic, and is it something that is lasting, or are you going to just go back to your old ways? Is it actually going to heal? Is it actually going to heal, and how is that going to happen? And because I know for myself that inner work is so important, and that it's not like for me, it's not something that just happens overnight, and at least not for me. So is it going to be something that's going to be lasting? Is there going to be counseling going along the way? How is this going to work with people? So if I send somebody to somebody and say, help this person, can you help them? How are you going to do that? I want to know how it's going to work, what kind of support they're going to get, and what that's going to look like.
And
Great point.
Just to add to that, Rita, I keep seeing psychiatrists that spend 10, 15 minutes with patients and give them medication, and they don't all necessarily need counseling. So that is really something that's concerning, that watching that happen. That, how are you feeling today? Should we up your medication? Maybe you're feeling good. Should we make it less medication? And then that's the end of it, not even knowing sometimes what other medications people are on. So if that's going to be added to this without the real careful watching, I think it could be adding to the issues with medication safety and medication use. So I'd love to see how it will be monitored,
It seems
as you said, Rita.
related. It's sort of like a supervision, because I think it isn't like, is somebody going to sit in a room and watch a patient while a drug takes effect? Or I appreciate the support that Rita was talking about, and the sort of kind of medical oversight that Eileen mentioned, but also it's like process-wise, is somebody is it going to be on site for a while? Is it like an inpatient thing, or is it, you know what I mean? Like, a little more immediate. What, somebody walk in and walk out, or stay there for a while?
Love it. Lachelle, Maim?
Well, I thought they brought up some good points. I think, I still go back to the healing. Go back to the fact that, we're dealing with people that are troubled. And, it should be protocol for them to have counseling, for them to get education, for them to be monitored. And although it has the capacity to be used as a vehicle to get them to the point of healing. I just think back in my own journey where I had to have something that could be a baseline for me so that I can have a steady foundation to start building on. And, it's not a substitute for a lot of other skills or strategies that people need in order to continue to thrive and grow. It's a traumatic experience that, they would have to overcome. However, overcoming that while living life at the same time. And if you're living long enough, you'll see that you have obstacles every day. So just really understanding that it is like anything else. It's not a prescription for to be used long term, but it's something that gets you to the point where you can kind of take the edge off and be able to talk about some of the harder things, while you're learning to forgive yourself, forgive others, and really dive deep into some of those triggers or root causes or even some traumatic things that you have blocked out of your own mind and life. So, again, I think it's not something that's a permanent subscription, but when we're dealing with a lot of these traumas that a lot of people have suffered from, really having the mindset of understanding that some of these people blocked out this trauma and didn't want to face it. So this is a way that they can face that. However, leading them through cautiously to be able to put to rest a lot of these traumas and begin to teach them what they didn't know and let go of some of those feelings of guilt, shame, disappointment, or whatever that really was not theirs to hold on to. But, based on coping strategies that might not have been the best thing, it's a number of issues that could spiral from a trauma that happened.
Any question that you need to have answered for this show to satisfy your curiosity?
Yeah, and first, I just want to say once again, everyone brought up some really great ideas, and just like really just now thinking about it I'm probably going to think about it for a long period of time. But really, I don't necessarily have a question, but rather, I guess it's maybe a series of questions. But one of the things that I've noticed throughout this conversation that we had tonight is that there's a reoccurring theme of healing, right? One of the things that a lot of people have brought up is especially the idea that sometimes individuals may go to a medical professional, a doctor, and sometimes there's some critiques about our current medical system where the doctor may not necessarily prioritize a person's well-being in the sense they don't really check in on them, like how they're doing as a person, but rather, okay, here's a prescription, take the medicine and then feel better. So more like a mechanic treating a person. So the general idea or the gist that I'm having is hearing the word healing, right? So I guess I'm really curious about this healing process specifically for psychedelics and what exactly is it going to look like for individuals, because a lot of the times from what I've been hearing and reading that it could be a very life-changing and altering experience, but at the same time I want to know what does that entail. Is just a one and done thing? Are we going to see this individual further progress from it? And I guess like another area of concern that I want to have, and obviously we're still in the very maybe not grassroots, but very beginning phases of this, is how is this going to be a one-time trend, or is this going to further evolve for future generations in utilizing psychedelics for better healing and treatment? And really, those I guess are like the two major areas that I would like to explore.
Mayim, you've taken us from the micro but significant, the deeply personal, to thinking about the future, perhaps the biggest scale possible. Thank you for that. My Webdelics friends, it's been great having you on the show today. Thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom, your insights, and your questions. You've given us a lot to think about, and you've provided some expectations that we need to make sure that we meet. It's truly been a privilege having you. Now, for those of you who are listening or watching, keep tuning in, because in future episodes, we're going to be discussing more about the current science and research around psychedelics. We're going to be discussing psychedelics within the framework of traditional medicine versus natural medicine and holistic medicine and alternative medicine. We're going to discuss safety. As mentioned earlier, we're going to be discussing some public policy issues, economics issues, spirituality issues. We're going to be discussing shamanism and what that looks like. We're going to be discussing ethics, and we're going to be discussing a lot more. We're also, perhaps most importantly, going to share some stories about how plant medicine has changed lives. And I promise you this, Those stories will be deeply moving. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to learn more, be sure to subscribe and leave a review or a positive comment and tell the folks that you care about everything that we're doing. Also, don't forget to follow Webdelics on LinkedIn, on TikTok, on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And be sure to check out our website at webdelics.com. That's WEBDELICS.com. Sign up for our blog, and for trusted information about psychedelics and plant medicine, join us next time for another episode of the Webdelics Podcast.